So there's been a lot of conversation lately about, generics. Are generics too powerful? Should we ban generics? And I want to kind of put my thoughts out there about this because, when I first heard about this, I thought of like, bro, what are people talking about? What do you mean ban sync below? But, as people have talked about it more and I've heard more about it, I understand where people are coming from and I kind of want to discuss my thoughts on the subject. So the first thing we kind of need to talk about is whether this is actually true. Like, are the generics too strong? So let's look at the best decks in the game and let's see if they're running generics. We have our man Florian up here. He is kind of top dog in the meta right now and he loves his generics. He's playing CNC. He's probably like playing 6 generic defense reactions. He likes generics quite a bit. And then we have Aurora. Aurora, she's gone now. And she's mostly like a synergistic deck. She cares a lot about her lightning cards, Runeblade stuff. But she still ran some generics. Like towards the end of her lifetime, she was on Sync or Shelter or both, I think. And then we have Nu. And Nu, bro, she's like the queen of generics. She loves just generic slop. She will play, if it's a good generic, Nu either has it in the deck or she's trying to find a way to put it in the deck. It's like CNC, she will run it like Sync Below, Fight for Scene, Shelter, Sigil of Solace, Enlightened Strike, like even the B tier generics, Nu is very interested in it. And so like, yeah, it seems like these generic cards, man, they're pretty good. And why is that the case? Well, the truth is that if you look at the generic card pool, man, they're kind of fire. They're just really strong. Like you keep taking cards and it's just banger after banger after banger after banger. Like they're very powerful cards. But why are these cards in the game? Like, why do generics exist? Why are they important? Are they important? Like, can we get rid of them? And so, we're going to talk about the generic toolbox, or generic slop, as I affectionately call it. And so I'm going to give you some examples of what this pool of cards is supposed to do in the game. Let's say that you're playing Fi. You're a fight player, right? And you have a very scary thought. For the first time in your life, you're like, man, I don't think I'm going to get out of this situation by playing out my entire hand. I might need to block. Maybe you're playing against Assassin, it's a really scary unit, something's going on, and you feel like you need to block. And as a fight player, you're going to look at your Draconic Ninja cards, and maybe you're not going to be very happy with the choices there. Maybe you're going to think that this is not cutting it. Like, Draconic Ninja cards are very offensive oriented, and so you need something else. You need to look elsewhere. And so you're going to look in the generic toolbox. And the generic toolbox is going to give you Fate for Scene. Sync Below. Whoa, this card's pretty good, huh? It blocks for 4, so it can stop all those carry units that you're worried about. And also it has this text that lets you like cycle a card out of hand, and it's almost like an offensive card because it lets you fix your hand, gives you a better offensive turn. This card's great. It does everything that you want. Thank you, generic toolbox. Let's look at another example. Let's say you're playing Nu, and as Nu, you're a disruptive deck. You want to be disrupting. You want to be doing some defense, and you run into some problem that makes it so you think, okay, this disruption stuff isn't enough. I need to find an offensive card that will help me. And so you will look at your Mystic Assassin card pool, and maybe you won't find the offensive options you want in there. Maybe those cards don't convert offensively too well. And so we'll look at the generic toolbox. And in the generic toolbox, you'll find, whoa, Enlightened Strike. This one's pretty good as well. The damage isn't like insane, but this card lets me convert any like 2 cards in my hand into 5 Gogen, which is like pretty respectable offensive pressure. It's probably not solving your baseline problem, but it's pretty good. Like it's helping you. And yeah, thank you, generic toolbox. You've been very helpful again. Let's say that you're playing Dorinthia Hatchets, right? You're like a very grinded deck. You're defensive. You want to get like a little bit of value over and over across the course of the game until you eventually win. And maybe you're playing against like maybe some aggro deck that is like setting 5 cards every turn and just doing insane offensive overlap. And you're like, I can't grind out under these circumstances. This is too much damage. I need like something to slow my opponent down. I need some disruption that will stop them from just attacking me over and over and over. And so, once again, you're going to look in the warrior card pool. The disruption there is pretty bad. And so you're going to look in the generic toolbox. And the generic toolbox will give you CNC. Holy moly, this one is really good. Not only is it stopping my offensive opponent from playing cards into me over and over, because I'm destroying their arsenal, it also is good into defense reactions, which I don't like as a warrior. This is awesome. Thank you, Generic Toolbox. And hopefully by now you're still on board with generics, right? Like, I understand that it's important for each hero to have an identity, but I think it's fine that, you know, the Phi deck that is very offensive decides it wants to be a little bit more well-rounded. And so they decide, okay, I'm going to put some defensive cards, I'm going to be a bit more of a balanced deck. I think this is all fine. So why are people, like, why do so many people feel like slighted by generics, and why is there such a strong sentiment against generics lately? And I think the problem starts popping up when you're Phi and you're looking at your juicy Draconic Ninja card pool full of nice offensive cards, and you start thinking, damn, I think I would rather have the generic. And you know, this is not necessarily the case for Phi. This is kind of an exaggeration. I don't think Phi is actually playing something like Enlightened Strike nowadays. However, this is definitely the case for Nu. So we've had Assassin for a while now, and we kind of know Assassin, they like Disruption a lot. They love their Disruption, and also they're pretty good defensively. I think this has kind of become a core part of the deck, of the class. A lot of their cards block for 3, they're very good defensively. And so you would expect that Assassin would have really good, would have like the best Arsenal Disruption tools and some of the best defensive tools. But then, in reality, you know, you look at these in-class Arsenal Disruption cards, and, you know, I'm not here to gaslight anyone. Like, Leave No Witness is a very strong card, absolutely an Assassin staple, very good. But if you made me pick between playing Leave No Witness or playing CNC, it's not an easy choice, you know. I'm the Disruption class, but the generic Disruption card is kinda one of my favorites. And then we look at the defensive tools, and this problem is way bigger, because, you know, there's a bunch of Assassin defense reactions that I can play. You won't catch me dead putting any of this in the deck before Sink Below. All of this stuff blocks for 3, why would I ever run it? You know, and I feel like that's when we start kind of having a problem with generic cards, is when they're outclassing the in-class alternatives. That feels pretty bad, in my opinion. Like, I would much rather be doing flavorful Assassin defense reactions than just playing Sink Below, for example. And that's how a lot of people arrive at kind of the discourse right now, which is, should we ban them? Are these generic cards too powerful? Maybe the last ban and restrict announcement was a huge mistake. Maybe it needed to have like Sink and Fate and Shelter and Tunic and CNC and just all the very powerful generic cards. Maybe we need to get rid of all of this. Maybe Brian Gottlieb has swindled us again. Is this actually the case? I don't think so. I think removing these cards would be actually a terrible idea. I'm gonna tell you why. The generic toolbox, it has some problems, as we've identified. Like, it's diluting hero identity, it's bad for like the flavor of the game. It has some issues, right? But it also has a very important place in the game, because imagine the same situation. Like, you're this Phi player, and you're playing as some disruptive deck, and you know, you just have a miserable time. Like, you sit down, first turn, they disrupt you. Second turn, they disrupt you. Third turn, you're like, okay, maybe it's time to block. You look at your Draconic Ninja hand, doesn't block that well. You try to block, they disrupt you anyway. And you just limp your way to a slow and painful defeat. That feels pretty bad. And I feel like what would feel even worse is if then you go home, and you go on February, and you look at your options, and you're like, oh, I actually don't have access to these strong defensive generic cards, so I guess I'm just boned. I guess my life is just to go and die to these Assassin players at my armory. I feel like if we remove the generic toolbox, we're going to be looking at a lot more polarizing matchups. We're going to lose a lot of the generic tools that heroes can use to fight each other. You know, if you've been around for a while, you might have experienced Enigma. Enigma has been kind of like, she was one of the most polarizing heroes in the game, because if you didn't have the tools to deal with Enigma in your class, you were kind of just boned. Like, the generic card pool cannot save you from Enigma. She has like this DPS check that you need to clear, and if you're playing something like poor little Victor Goldman here, and you don't have the tools in your class, you're going to look at the generic card pool, it's not going to save you. Enigma is just going to run you over. It's an extremely polarizing matchup, and it feels really bad. So I don't think the correct decision is to ban generics either. I feel like the number of polarizing matchups would increase like a lot. It would be a way less balanced game in my opinion. So what should we do? We can't ban them, but they still present a problem for the game. So what's the solution? I actually believe that the solution is kind of already in motion, and that is good in-class alternatives to generics. From now on, I'm going to be focusing on defense reactions because I feel like those are the ones that the most people are worried about. And so I'm going to talk about some in-class in-class defensive cards that I think are great. Let's start with Taunting Rendition. So this one up here. This one blocks for 4. It's for Rune Blades, but you can discard it to prevent 2 instead, which 2 is less than 4, so this doesn't sound as strong as something like Think Below. But because it's prevention, it lets you interact with some other stuff. It's more flexible than Think Below. It lets you deal with arcane damage, which Think Below can't really do. And also, when you activate the prevention effect, you get a Rune Chant. And Rune Chant baseline, it's 1 arcane, it's fine. But also, if you're playing Rune Blade, there might be some synergistic benefits to having a Rune Chant. Maybe if you're playing Vincent, this Rune Chant is going to allow you to Rune Gate and attack out. Cheat the pitch curve, playing an attack for free from the banish, feels awesome. If you're playing Viserai before he got LL'd, maybe this is going to allow you to discount Rune Flash. Actually, Rune Chants are mostly for discounting attacks. Anyway, let's talk about the other one we have here, which is Reduce to Rune Chants. This one is also a Rune Blade card, and I have a lot of beef with Rune Blades, but I think their defensive cards are pretty well made. This one costs 1, but if you have a Rune Chant, it actually costs 0, and it blocks for 4 and creates a Rune Chant. So this is like, bro, the numbers on this are insane. Like, Think Below is blocking for 4, this thing is blocking for 4, and giving me 1 arcane. This is 5, this one is crazy. It's like, in raw numbers, it's better than the generics. And the generics are pretty powerful, this card's like crazy. Another thing that I really like about this card is that you need to be buying into your class for it to be strong, right? If you need to pay 1, this card is garbage. Garbanzola, completely unusable. However, as long as you have this little bit of synergy in your deck that allows you to play this for free, this card becomes amazing. And I think that's very interesting. And then we have Take It on the Chin. Take It on the Chin prevents 2 and creates an agility. 2, once again, much less than 4. So you might be thinking, how is this little dinky card that prevents 2 going to be better than Think Below? And the reason is because this is mostly played in Warrior, and this agility token for a Warrior, if you don't know, agility gives you going in on the first attack of your turn. This is going to basically replace a go again card that you would have to play from your hand. And most of these go again cards are blocking for 3. So if you think about it, okay, I can block with 1 more card. This actually prevented 5 damage now. Damn, that's pretty good. And then if you take Valiant Dynamos into account, which is the legendary Warrior equipment, if I swing 2 weapons, I'm getting 1 more life back. Damn! Take It on the Chin has like saved me 6 life. This is crazy. This card is amazing. And the thing that I think is key about these cards is that not only are they good, but they're good because of the class that they're in. Like, if you give Reduce to Rune Chants to any class that is not Rune Blade, they don't have anything to do with the card. Like, they don't care about it. If you give Take It on the Chin to a bunch of classes in the game, I think most of them can't really utilize it as well as Warrior either. I really like these cards that are like, they're more powerful than the generic D-Reacts, but only if you're working within like the flavor and mechanics of your class. I feel like this is the way to go for solving the generic problem. But some people don't like this solution. There are some real concerns with this solution. And the main argument that I hear is the they will just run all of it argument. And what does this mean? The idea here is that if you print strong defensive cards for classes, those classes will end up running all the good in-class defensive cards, and then they will also run all the good generic defensive cards on top of that. Which I don't think is true, but let's look at let's do a little case study, which I think is interesting to talk about. Let's talk about Aurora at Pro Tour London. So to give you a bit of background, going into Pro Tour London, there were 2 big decks. It's Aurora and it's Enigma. Big surprise. And so, if you're the Aurora player, you kind of have to figure out 2 matchups. You need to figure out how you're going to beat Enigma, and you need to figure out how you're going to beat the Mirror, okay? And so,
you know, this is kind of like I'm setting the stage, and you go with your testing team. You're playing Aurora. You start playing games against other Auroras, and you start realizing, damn, defense reactions would really help in this matchup. They would really like give me a bump in my win rate against other Aurora players. And so you run into what, in my opinion, is a very interesting deck building challenge, which is like, okay, I'm playing Aurora. I am a synergistic, aggressive deck that wants to execute like my own game plan. I care mostly about, you know, playing out my cards. I don't really like blocking that much. But in one of the most important matchups in the current meta, I want to play defense reactions. How do I solve this problem? You know, I'm not an Aurora player. I wasn't doing this whole testing that they did. But I do think that it's interesting in hindsight. And so I went and took a look. I wanted to know. I was curious. How many defense reactions did the best Aurora decks actually choose to play? And more importantly, I think very important because we're discussing this argument of, oh, they might just play all of it. I want to know how many defense reactions did they choose not to play? I feel like that's a very interesting part of the question. And so let's take a look. This is in my opinion, the defense reactions that Aurora could reasonably play that would help her in the mirror. So you have all the classics. You have Fate, you have Sync, you have Shelter, no surprises there. You have Sigil of Suffering, which, you know, it doesn't block for 4, which is the main thing you want in the mirror. But it can block for 4 because it deals 1 arcane damage, and if they take it, it goes up 1. And it also has like this very strong synergistic effect with the Aurora deck, because it's like, if you have Channel Lightning Valley on the board, it draws you a card on the opponent's turn. Normally you can't draw that many cards from Channel Lightning Valley. Anyway, this is just a strong synergistic card, which happens to be a defense reaction, which is cool. And then you also have That All You Got, which doesn't block for 4, but it has this like niche application where if you put it in front of Starfall, it's going to draw you back a card. So it's kind of like, it saves you a little bit of health, but it doesn't really cost you a card on offense. It also has some like niche applications, which I think is interesting. And so what did the Aurora players actually end up choosing? And the answer is that every single Aurora in the top 8 agreed that you want to play exactly 2 out of these 5 cards. And, you know, I think this kind of, it hurts the argument that if you just keep printing good defensive cards, people will just keep putting them in the decks. And, you know, there's immediately an argument here of like, you know, you're telling me that there's five good options. Maybe there's only 2 options, bro, and that's why they only pick 2 of them, right? That's not really the case because they don't really agree on the cards that you should bring. So I went ahead and looked into deck lists because, again, I think this is interesting. And here's the consensus from the top 8, is that you want exactly 6 defense reactions. You don't want to play 3, you don't want to play 9, you want to play 6. 6 is the number. And then among these 6, you always want to bring Sigil of Suffering. So that's the synergistic one I told you about. And then you want either Shelter or Sync. You don't want both. You want one of the 2. Because again, you're trying to hit this 6 defense reactions number. So that's 2 playsets of 3 cards. And obviously, you know, this is just an example. I just picked a deck that happened to have this place in time where it wanted to be more defensive than it usually is, and I looked at how that went. And I'm using this to kind of illustrate this point that just because there's more defensive cards doesn't mean we're going to be playing more defensive cards. However, if we look at the same event, the same top 8, the same meta, the other deck that ended up winning the whole thing looked at the same list of cards that Aurora looked at and said, no, you know what? I don't want 3. I don't want 6, I don't want 9, and I don't want 12. I want 15 defense reactions. Okay, so what does this mean? Does this mean that like my whole argument is silly and we are, you know, if you're a defensive deck, you're actually going to play as many defense reactions as you can? I don't think so. You know, obviously Enigma isn't a great example in my favor, but I don't think this is actually the case. I think like in many situations in Flesh and Blood, every deck has this kind of ideal number of cards that they want for a certain job. This is no like foreign concept. Like every deck has a number of blues that they want to play. If you're playing Ranger, you have like an ideal number of arrows that you want to play. And I think in the same vein, every deck has kind of this like ideal number of defense reactions that they want to play. And I think that this is fine. You know, if Aurora is a more offensive deck and she's in this weird situation where she needs to play a bit more defensively, and she says, okay, I need to play 6 defense reactions. That's okay. And if Enigma, a more defensive deck, wants to play 15 defense reactions in the same meta, I think that's also okay. I don't think if we keep printing defense reactions, we're going to have decks with 20 defense reactions. I don't think that's where we're headed. And so that's why, to bring it back around, I think that this in-class alternative to generics is the way to go. I think there's a lot of upside. Like I said before, like it makes the game more flavorful, there's better hero identity, and like, bro, stop telling me that everyone's gonna be playing a million defense reactions. That's not gonna happen. Like we can barely find decks right now that wanna play the 3 very strong generic defense reactions that we have. Like we can print more alternatives to generic cards, and it's going to be okay. Like decks, I don't think decks will become like super degenerate as some people seem to feel like they will become. And that's it for my video. Thanks for watching. I've been thinking about this stuff a lot, so I wanted to put it into kind of a like coherent, productive output. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, that's it. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.